stick to the end for a message from Surfshark VPN. So, I decided not to do a review on 𝘰𝘶 Bridge of Spirits, not because I didn't enjoy the game, in fact, quite the opposite, but because I liked it so much, I really didn't want to put myself through the stress of explaining why I liked it so much, if that makes sense. Because if I had released that video, it probably would have been at least 30 minutes long, and what's 30 minutes for you guys is actually like 40 hours worth of editing for me, and let's be serious, there's no way I could have done that without completely losing my mind in the middle of an engineering semester. So what I decided to do instead is just tell you how I felt about the game in a series of little videos that'll come out whenever they come out, whether it be now or in 2 months, and integrated into various main topics alongside other video games, like how to do bosses, for example. And of course, I know you guys wouldn't want just 8 straight weeks of 𝘰𝘶 content in your sub box, so I'll be bundling it with other uploads, and again, more so using it as a part of a broader discussion rather than just making videos dedicated to it entirely. Which is pretty much what this video is, because I wholeheartedly believe that 𝘰𝘶 Bridge of Spirits has some of the best boss fights in a game since Dark Souls. And I know that's going to sound like an overstatement to a lot of you guys, but just let me explain. So 𝘰𝘶 Bridge of Spirits released on PlayStation and PC a while ago, and I had the luxury of being able to pick it up and play it. In fact, Ember Lab actually attempted to send me a creator kit for the game, but being that I was neck deep in college shenanigans, I didn't even get a chance to see the email before it was too late. Save your insults for the end, please. But one of the things that really confused me was how critical everyone was of the gameplay. You know, during the first wave of reviews and impressions, the general vibe was that the game was good, but largely due to its art style and delivery, not because of its gameplay, which I genuinely disagree with. And this kind of makes me feel like I'm not your average gamer, so if you find yourself disagreeing with anything I'm about to say, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. Because I found myself in a similar situation when I made my review of The Last of Us Part 2 about a year ago. I was of the camp that the story was good, but the gameplay wasn't, and apparently that was simply the wrong opinion. Needless to say, I don't think 𝘰𝘶 Bridge of Spirits was successful solely because of its art style and story. I think where this game stands out is a combination of its gameplay and delivery. You're not gonna find another game on the market that allows you to do combos like this, and also has cutscenes like this. You're just not. So I found it both extremely shocking and disappointing that so many reviewers just straight up called the gameplay alright or acceptable. Maybe I just don't like the innate repetitive nature of stealth games like The Last of Us Part 2, and maybe I enjoy being forced to think outside of the box and practicing what combos to use before entering a boss situation. But I also understand that most people aren't like me. If you're a person who prefers accessibility over combos and planning, I could totally see why you might not like games like 𝘰𝘶 or Dark Souls. Because these games have a focus on laughably low player health and a high dependency on great execution. When playing Dark Souls or 𝘰𝘶 Bridge of Spirits, you could probably take like 3 hits from a boss before you just keel over. Like, the amount of damage these guys do is almost unfair, so you really don't have any room to make repeated mistakes. See, Bridge of Spirits isn't just a hack and slash with the option to choose if and which special abilities you'll use, which is what most games are nowadays. Think God of War 2018, an absolutely phenomenal experience that has us all excited for the sequel, but you could probably get through the entire game using just 2 or 3 of your favorite axe abilities with some Spartan rage sprinkled in. God of War 2018 doesn't force you to recognize and use every aspect of gameplay. You pretty much play how you want, and it's designed in such a way that most playstyles will be successful. So while the game's bosses were beautifully rendered and added an amazing touch to the great story, no one really praises that game for having mechanically great boss fights. Sure, the gameplay was amazing, but not because it was technically complex. In fact, quite the opposite. It was because it's easy to pick up and ridiculously satisfying to perform executions. But at that point, the game's mechanics are out of your hands. It is ridiculously satisfying to see Kratos blow up a dragon skull in 4K, or having your screen shake a bit every time you swing that axe, but by and large, these kinds of things are just dopamine feeding eye candy that don't really shake up the core gameplay loop. Games like God of War and The Last of Us Part 2 are more on-rails cinematic experiences than Dark Souls or 𝘰𝘓 Bridge of Spirits. And while this formula does make for absolutely amazing visuals and story, a lot of things are either left out of the player's control or determined for them before they had a chance to think of the solution for themselves. And that's not to say I disliked God of War 2018's gameplay. That's not the case at all. It's actually one of my favorite games to play. I just brought all this stuff up to highlight the differences between what makes good technical gameplay and good cinematic gameplay, because when you stop and think, there's a huge difference between the two. And this is where I mentioned 𝘰𝘓 Bridge of Spirits and Dark Souls. These two games won't just let you choose one playstyle and stick to it. They force you to constantly stay on your toes and master every aspect of the game, whether you like it or not. Which is in stark contrast to games like God of War or The Last of Us Part 2, where the developers had zero issues letting you choose how you wanted to fight a boss. And for games like that, this is okay, because both God of War and The Last of Us Part 2 focus on good feeling gameplay. And that's not to say they didn't have technical prowess as well, but by and large it was the weight of Kratos' axe and Ellie's cold-blooded executions that made those games so fun. You know, there are reasons why barely anyone uses bombs in The Last of Us Part 2. Number one, because they weren't necessary to beat the game. Number two, to use effectively, they required a spatial awareness that most players simply don't possess. And number three, why would you put yourself through that noise when you could just watch Ellie break someone's neck? But for games like 𝘰𝘓 Bridge of Spirits, Dark Souls, and to a certain extent Smash, God help this comment section. They don't quote-unquote feel fun by default, you make them fun by learning how to play them effectively. While you had the option to use the bomb in The Last of Us Part 2, if you didn't learn how to properly use the bomb in 𝘰𝘓, while it's technically possible to beat the game without it, you'd probably still be trying. Because like I said, unlike God of War or The Last of Us, Dark Souls and 𝘰𝘓 don't let you choose your playstyle. Every boss presents a problem with a specific solution, and unfortunately, your preferred playstyle probably won't be the solution to every enemy you come across. Sometimes you get lucky and it is, but others you're just going to have to sit back and rethink how you approach the situation. And oftentimes you'll have to take a step back and reteach yourself how to use a mechanic or more adequately use a certain combo. You want to stay back and fire your bow the whole time? Most bosses will just straight up charge you while you're loading in your next arrow. Want to stay up close and personal and melee? Well, most bosses say that you should social distance. Even if you prefer mid-range combat, most bosses won't let you stay there for long since they have their own form of projectile. 𝘰𝘓 Bridge of Spirits, like Dark Souls, doesn't let you get complacent, doesn't let you fall into a routine, and doesn't let you pick a single gameplay style. To be good at this game, you actually have to learn how to play it, because button pressing simply isn't a viable option. And I think that's where most people who didn't enjoy the gameplay find issues with it. Some people just enjoy being able to play a certain way for their entire experience, and others don't think it should be necessary to put this much brain power into a video game. And more power to them, I really can't argue against that. But personally, I think this is a major issue with the stealth genre in general. Sticking to a single style of gameplay for 20+ hours is bound to get tedious to some, regardless of what that style is. And by the very nature of stealth games, they don't really have much of a choice in this field. However, at the end of the day, it's all personal preference and everything is subjective. But one thing is for certain, 𝘰𝘓 Bridge of Spirits gameplay and boss fights were not as average as some reviews make it out to be. Because in all my years of gaming, I've yet to play 3 titles that I'd put this game in the same boat with. And I think if you've already played the game, you probably agree with me, but if you still don't, allow me to offer one final counter argument. 𝘰𝘓 Bridge of Spirits is a difficult game, there's no arguing that. The developers refuse to give you any easy wins when it comes to boss fights, and if you don't get creative and try your best to master every part of the game, some of those boss fights will probably be utterly infuriating. But since I'm a gameplay masochist, I just had a big smile on my face the whole time. But when you do eventually get a good grasp on the game and experiment with everything it has to offer, you'll probably notice that the boss fights are actually quite enjoyable because they force you to use 𝘰𝘓 in every way you know how. And since you put the time in, you feel like you actually figured the game out yourself, and it wasn't just some scripted event that led you to your triumph. But if at any point, and I know a lot of people probably did this, you turned down the difficulty below normal because you couldn't get past a certain boss or area, I think you missed the point of what the gameplay was trying to indirectly teach you. That You simply can't win by playing the way you've been playing, and maybe you should try something else. You see, 𝘰𝘓 Bridge of Spirits doesn't expect you to do the impossible. And the same thing goes for Dark Souls. That's the reason the entire Souls series doesn't even come with the ability to lower the default difficulty. The devs know how hard their game is. They did spend years making it after all. So if a boss in 𝘰𝘓 or Souls ever seems unthinkably hard on the normal difficulty, you're not a bad player. That's just the game subtly hinting to you that you probably missed something or that you're not using all the tools available to you. And unfortunately, the time it takes to realize what the game is trying to say by constantly feeding you deaths is more time than some people are willing to give up. So I'm not going to fault anyone who lowered the difficulty to easy just so they could move along. But when playing on easy, which I did for the sake of this video, the enemies and bosses are so unbelievably watered down that you can now in fact do everything the game was trying to get you not to do, and do it quite easily. Like, imagine if Dark Souls had an easy mode and you could just button mash X for every boss. Would it even be fun anymore? Or would the gameplay just be average? Games like Dark Souls and 𝘰𝘓 are heavily dependent on difficulty because it directly affects how a gamer will interact with the world. So if you want to use a personalized playstyle for the whole game and would prefer a glory kill like system, these games probably aren't your best choice. But just because they're different doesn't mean they should be labeled as average. And I'm honestly inclined to believe that most people who say that either haven't played the game yet or caved and turned down the difficulty. 𝘰𝘓 Bridge of Spirits on easy mode is honestly a shell of what the game is trying to be. It doesn't require much thought and essentially turns it into a hack and slash, which the developers obviously don't prefer. And to put things into a bit more context, I think 𝘰𝘓's normal and very hard modes are closer in difficulty than normal and easy. That's how much of a drop off easy mode introduces into the game, and if you're getting it, I really wouldn't recommend using this setting. It actively makes the gameplay average and somewhat repetitive when in fact it really isn't. However, I do understand why the devs wanted to include it, because even though the game is technically rated for about 8 hours of story, if you start a playthrough completely blind and do not lower the default difficulty, I don't see anyone finishing it under 12. So Ember Lab respects people's time. If you don't want to master the game, they're not going to force you to. But similarly speaking, the game just isn't the same if you don't figure out what it's trying to tell you. So how do you do bosses in video games? Well, don't hand it to us. Don't script it. Change how we've played the game up until that point. Don't make it impossible, but force us to get better. And as some guy on Reddit once put it, Dark Souls is not that hard. You just can't play it like an idiot and expect to do well. Just like you can't expect your internet security to do well if you don't have a VPN. And that's where today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN, comes into play. So I've been using Surfshark VPN for a little over half a year now, and honestly I'm very pleased with the service. It's hands down one of the best VPNs I've used thus far. And what is a VPN, you ask? Well, VPN stands for Virtual Private Network, and Surfshark is one that has tons of quirks and features on top of its great security. It's fast and easy to use, a breeze to install, and runs on unlimited devices from a single subscription. And these devices can range from laptops, desktops, to even your mobile phone. Surfshark acts as an intermediary to keep your data safe from any potential hackers who may have subverted typical security measures. For instance, stealing your sensitive information through public Wi-Fi. With Surfshark, that won't ever happen. It even allows you to pick which region streaming service catalog you want to browse, which has actually been coming in pretty handy lately whenever I want to watch region locked content on my streaming accounts. You'd think that since you're paying the full Netflix price that you'd be getting the full Netflix catalog, but apparently not, and Surfshark could help. So guys, use code INNO at checkout, that's INNO, for a whopping 83% discount and an extra 3 months free when you visit my link in the description and give it a whirl. Thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. But without further ado, if you liked the video, leave a like. If you disliked the dislike, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a future upload on the channel. Oh, and hit that bell notification button if you're so inclined. I've been Innocence, you've been the audience, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.